And God said, "Let there be
The
light."
Lord says, "Let my people go."
I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
This is the Talkin' Bible podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the first episode of this year of our brand new podcast titled Talkin' Bible. Hey, I'm sitting down with Jeanie Schwarz. Hello, Jeanie.
Hi, Pastor Rohan. I'm very excited about talking Bible with you this year.
Yes, we've gone from the Bible Wait What to Talkin' Bible, and I'm excited about it. We're going to talk lots of Bible, talk about Jesus, talk about red letter Jesus, look at the stuff that Jesus says. That's what we have in store for us this year.
Who Jesus is.
Who
That's
Jesus
what I want to
is
know.
by what he says. I really picked up on your conversation around that, and I really like that. I think that's a great way to approach this year. How do we find out who Jesus is? By looking at the stuff that Jesus says. Very good.
Who is he in the text?
Yes.
What's he trying to teach us?
What is he revealing about his nature
Yes.
by what he says?
Yeah. That's what I'm looking for. Like, I want to know who this guy is. I want to be able to pinpoint him down.
Yeah.
Because I haven't been able to at all.
No, well, we're not going to pinpoint him down in one episode, but we're hopefully throughout the course of this year we'll get, maybe the way to look at it is you can't pinpoint Jesus because he's so expansive, but maybe we'll get it.
Yeah. No, don't tell me that.
Maybe we'll get more pieces of the jigsaw on the table in place. Let's go with that metaphor.
Okay, I'll give you that one. That's a
We'll
pretty good one.
always be putting pieces on the jigsaw till the day we die, but hopefully we'll have a clearer picture of what he looks like as we have these conversations this year.
Yeah, because I get the feeling the more I read, the more questions I ask, the more I think about it, the less I will actually know. Because it will open up more and more and more questions. So I feel like if once I learn this little part about Jesus, that's going to open the door to
more questions.
What about this?
Yes,
what
that's
about
right.
that?
Well, that's
Who
good,
is he here?
Good discipleship and good Bible study technique, Jeanie. Better to have an open-ended, inquisitive, curious mind than to have the shut, closed, I know it all mind. You cannot go wrong with being curious.
Well, yeah, I agree.
And it keeps you young.
Yeah,
It's been
does.
shown that curiosity keeps people young.
Proven.
Scientifically proven that curiosity keeps people young.
Well, I think the world has actually been curious about Jesus for 2,000 years. So that's why maybe the faith still kind of feels young.
Maybe so,
because people are curious.
Yeah, well, that's it. And that point being is that, 2,000 years on, we still can't fully grasp the depth of who Jesus is because he's infinite.
Why are we talking about him? Why are we still talking about this guy?
Well, one of the things he's going to talk about today is actually, it's one of the simple little phrases, the salt of the earth, which comes across into common vernacular, but it's one of those ones that's a little confusing. It's like,
Doesn't make any sense to me.
What does it mean? You're the salt of the earth.
Yeah, you are the salt of the earth, and it appears in 3 of the Gospels. Matthew 5:13, Mark 9:50, and Luke 14:34 to 35. So we're going to look at what does it mean to be the salt of earth? What did Jesus mean? And who is he in this moment? The verse is basically, you are the salt of the earth, but if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty? It's no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet.
Yeah.
That's essential. That's in Matthew.
Which is pretty harsh.
It is harsh.
What's the point? You're the salt. If you don't do your job, you're going to be trampled under the feet. It's not one of Jesus' gentle Jesus kind of meek and mild statements. That's pretty confronting.
It is confronting, particularly because in a few chapters just before this, Jesus has actually called these disciples, taken them from the boats and says to them, hey, I'm going to make you, follow me, I'll make you fishers of men.
Yeah.
And now he's saying, well, actually, you're the salt of the earth. What do you think they thought of that statement?
That's a really good question. And I'm not even sure that I fully grasp all the nuance or all the depth or all the context of this statement. It seems like, even though it's a few words, it's rich with meaning. So it would be helpful for us maybe to think about, well, what would Jesus have meant when he said salt of the earth? Because we kind of know now, we have a word for, when a person is a salt of the earth kind of person, we just go, they're down to earth, they're a real person, genuine, what you see is what you get kind of person. That's what we say. But what would Jesus have meant by being the salt of the earth? And so I guess we have to just quickly think about, well, what are the roles of salt? What were the roles of salt in that time? I mean, we essentially use salt today for flavouring our food and having a bath after you've got sore muscles.
If you're lucky enough to have a bath.
If you're lucky enough to have a bath. That's about it, right? But it was much richer in its meaning, in its usefulness. I mean, salt preserved. They didn't have refrigeration systems, so salt was a preservative. It slowed down the purification or the putrefaction process. Didn't stop it, just slowed it down. So it was used for kind of that whole, preservation. It was used for
Like making beef jerky.
like beef jerky.
They gotta
Exactly.
go for a
now
walk.
it's a funky
Yeah.
thing to do,
Yes.
but that was how they preserved meat in that day.
That's mostly what they would have eaten.
That's
They're traveling around.
Salted meat. Yep, that's right. That was a pretty standard way to eat because otherwise meat would go off in a hurry. So yes, exactly. While it's something you do with your in a hobby now, it was the way they lived.
And they had it nearby in the Dead Sea, I suppose.
That's right. There's an abundance of salt, lots of it. So it's everywhere around there. Yes, the Dead Sea is one of the saltiest places on the saltiest water bodies on Earth, and you can get crystals of salt from there, huge crystals of salt. So yes, there's plenty of it around. Good for, as I said, was used for therapeutic processes. So the Dead Sea would be used for all kinds of day spa treatment. It was the original day spa because of the salt. It's used for purification. So you put salt on a wound to heal a wound. They still do that today. You can still do that, although we have more advanced ways of doing it. Of course, it was and still is used for enhancing flavour. And it also had a covenantal symbolism, if you like. It was part of what they would put in offerings. And in that context, it was used sort of representing faithfulness. It had a metaphorical meaning of faithfulness. Or when I'm seizing an offering with salt, I'm saying there's part of me is going to be preserved in that offering. So it had a metaphorical context. So they're the sorts of things, I guess, the background to what the disciples are hearing or what they're loading up in their brain when they're hearing Jesus say, "You are the salt of the earth."
And earth in this context is not soil, but it's the greater world.
The world, I think.
People.
Yeah, that's right. I think it would be the world. He probably uses the word earth, not the Greek word for world, but it would mean world. You would be talking about it as the world, I'm assuming. You probably got it in your notes, do you?
Not that little part.
Not that little part.
You just made me think of something else, that the idea that without salt, human life can't be sustained. Pliny, the younger or the older or whichever one it was, I don't know.
Pliny the older,
said
Pliny the
that.
younger.
Yeah, without salt, human life can't be sustained. So what does it mean in that context?
So he's talking about it in the fact that we need salt in our bodies. Do you think that's what he means?
Yes. He is.
So he figured out that salt was a necessary thing for our body. Well, we know that when we start cramping up and we need salt, don't we?
Yeah,
Body salts.
scientifically
Athletes
we can prove his
understand it.
statement now.
Yeah, we can prove his statement, yeah. So he understood to some degree the necessity for salt in a diet. Okay. And ironically, we're in a society where we probably have too much salt in our diet.
Not me. I can't get enough of this stuff.
You like the salt. But,
Give me the salty crackers. Don't give me the chocolate.
yeah, okay, you like the salty stuff. Yeah, right. But back then, I guess, it was not just a choice, a dietary choice. It was a matter of life and death, is what Pliny's saying.
Yeah.
You need to have salt in your diet.
You need to have salt to make your beef jerky to travel to see your relatives.
Okay, I thought it was more than that.
Yeah. And I've got it written here. Salt was required in the sacrifices that
Yes.
you
Yep.
mentioned before, and that it is. Yeah, you mentioned part of the covenant. The covenant.
Covenant, yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
What does your notes say? Because I'm a bit shaky on that. I just understand that something to do with permanence or because salt, preserves, and it was something to do with faithfulness. But I'm just trying to remember what I've learned or what I've read.
Well, my notes don't really go into it that much.
Depth.
I just have here the teaching of the gospel is like salt. It's penetrating, quick, and powerful. It reaches the heart. It's cleansing and flavoring and preserves from decay and rotting. We read of the Savior of the knowledge of Christ. I'm not sure what that means. For all other learning is insipid without that. An eternal covenant is called a covenant of salt. I'm not sure my notes, but I got confused there. And the gospel is an eternal gospel. Salt was required in all the sacrifices. It seems like there's a lot in salt.
Yes, there is. It does sound like there's a lot in it, doesn't there?
Yes, we have to think about it a lot. But I was reading this statement here, and what do you think of this statement? A little bit of salt can alter and influence the flavor.
Yeah, I reckon it can. I mean, that's why we put salt onto something. It changes something. I'd be interested in scientifically whether it's changing flavors or adding to flavors. I'm not sure. I haven't done a salt science degree, but whether or not it actually,
Me neither.
Whether or not it actually modifies the other flavors, like influences them, like biologically reacts with them, or whether it's just an additional flavor, or it takes something that's flavorless or less flavorsome and adds something to it. But it clearly does something which influences our palate, doesn't it?
Yeah. So imagine if Jesus is saying to these disciples, hey, you are the influence of the earth.
I think that's great. I wonder if that's a big part of it. is that, you know, when you put you sprinkle your salt on your you know, fish, your fish that you've caught in the Sea of Galilee, you put some salt on it. You know how that influences the flavour? Maybe that's what you're supposed to be like.
I have never wanted a packet of salt and vinegar chips more in my life than right now. But anyway, I read this statement by this person called Elihu Burritt. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Or Elihu would be a good Jewish name.
Yeah, okay. I'm glad you said that better. This person was an American diplomat he died in 1879 actually, a philanthropist, social activist and blacksmith. And he says something along the lines of this influence idea, that salt is an influence, because no human being can. Let me start again. Okay, this is episode 1. You can see we're
a bit rusty.
No human being can come into this world without increasing or diminishing the sum total of human happiness, not only of the present, but of every subsequent age of humanity. In the words of Paul, we will manifest the sweet aroma of the knowledge of Christ in every place. For we are a fragrance of Christ to God among those who are being saved and among those who are perishing. To the one we are an aroma from death, to the other an aroma from life to life. In either case, our lives have profound effects, and even persecution is to not alter our function in the world. So therefore, as we are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, it is this influence that we have over people.
Oh, that's so good. I reckon you could just about listen to that and that'd be enough. Because I hear what he's saying, and amongst lots of things he's saying there, but it sounds like he's saying you're going to be salt and you're going to be an influence. It's up to you how you're going to influence.
Yeah, exactly. But even if you don't choose to influence,
if you don't choose, you are influencing. Yes,
you are
right.
influencing all the time.
Yes.
Every choice that you make is going to affect somebody.
Yeah. It's either going to be for good or for ill.
Yes,
is what he's saying.
Yeah, and so if you are the salt of the earth, which preserves and does good, then you are a good influencer.
Yes, you're good salt. Yeah, which fits with what he's saying when he says if your salt loses its saltiness, it's worth nothing, might as well be thrown out and trampled. Because I guess what Jesus is making the point is that your salt's going to do something, but if you're not doing the right thing with it, throw it away. You're better off. You're not going to add any value to anybody. You'll actually detract value from people's lives.
Yeah. Yes, that's totally right. So if you, as a believer, as a disciple of Christ, if you have lost that ability to influence others for the good of the kingdom, then what are you doing? You know?
Yeah, that's right. So I guess what Jesus is showing here is when he's saying this statement, he's actually talking to them about what they are, but not just what they are for themselves, what they are actually as part of the world they're connected to, of salt of the world, salt of the earth, the people that they connect with. And he's saying, you guys, your job, your role description is to bring influence, good influence to other people. You can't just live for yourself. He's seems to me like he's telling them you need to actually be a positive influence. It's part of your role description as a human being and as one of my disciples.
Yeah, and without it, it's finished. Like if you weren't doing those things, positively influencing, would the church actually exist?
That's right. We wouldn't have the church if we didn't have people doing the work of being salty influence in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, so why is Jesus telling these people, because Jesus knows he's the Messiah and he's the one everybody's going to love and worship. So why is he saying this to them? Just for that reason that, hey, I'm going to build my kingdom through you. It's your influence. You are going to have this power and authority.
I like it. Yeah, so he's putting something into them, which we'll see a lot of Jesus do as we listen to the podcast this year. I'm sure we'll see Jesus spends a lot of time with his disciples, but he's trying to deposit something into them, not for them, but so that they can reproduce it, so they can make disciples in other people, so they can build his kingdom. So it has to begin with him telling them, guys, you actually matter. Your life matters. Who you are matters. You've got a choice. Are you going to be salty in a good way, or to say if a salt loses its saltiness, what he means is, well, salt can't lose its saltiness, but salt in that day wasn't always pure. It had other minerals in it. But if it was exposed to moisture for too long, the first thing that would be absorbed or dissolve would be the salt. So what you'd be left with was a bunch of stuff which didn't have any saltiness in it.
Okay.
So
right.
then we can't use that. We can't use food with it. It won't preserve. It doesn't change our taste, so we'll throw it out. So we'll trample on it and turn it into the roads, which is what they did to stop growth. So it tells me that Jesus is really in a space of a few words, like, half a paragraph, a couple of sentences, he's calling them to a very high responsibility to be an influence for good in the world.
Yes, and to keep that influence, to look after it. You don't want to lose your saltiness. Stay salty.
Stay salty, yeah.
What do you think it would have felt like for these fishermen to be told that you guys are going to influence the earth?
It would have been crazily radical for a bunch of fishermen from the Sea of Galilee, yeah.
Because how important were fishermen?
Oh, they were pretty low down the economic chain.
Yes, they provided food. Or They caught food.
Yeah, but they weren't big influences in society, not at all. So Jesus is calling them to something greater than themselves.
So he's picking these people that would have just been bypassed. I mean, they're not nearly on their way to being priests. They were never going to be priests or have any position of authority or power or in their lifetime ever.
Yep.
And he's saying to these guys, not only are you going to be fishers of men, you're going to influence the earth. Why would Jesus just take these normal people and give them that?
Good point. I think that shows me that, the Bible says that, and time again in the scriptures, God works with broken people. He works with people who haven't got it all together. Abraham didn't have it all together.
At this point, we don't know they're broken. We just can assume that
we can assume they're not elites. Yeah, so they're not the people that people would expect to be used to be world changers. So let's just go with that. To be influencers. Yes, that's right. They're not people you would expect to be influencers. Good way to put it. Yeah, and yet God, through Jesus is choosing to use people who the world doesn't expect to be influencers. So that tells me something about Jesus. It tells me that he takes people who are wherever they're at, and he will walk them on a journey. He will use anybody that's available.
And it seems that he gives us the choice to keep our saltiness because, as we said before, you are going to influence somebody, either negatively or positive, but you can choose to do that.
That's true.
Positively.
I like it. And
you can choose to stay on my side.
Stay a disciple of Jesus. Yep. If you're going to be an influencer, you have to choose to let him choose to allow that influence to be maintained by spending time with him.
And understand the value in it too, because when he says, you're going to be thrown out and trampled, you can see the opposite of that because when you have your salty life, you are very valued.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. People will respect you. People value your input. Not that it's about us, but yes, if John Maxwell says the leader with no one following is just taking a walk. So, if you look around and there's no one following you, maybe you're not very salty. You might think you're salty, but if there's no one following you, then maybe you're not as salty as you thought you were.
Oh dear, I got to think about that because I'm pretty sure there's no one behind me.
Jeannie, you have lots of people following you. Don't be so self-effacing. But you have lots of people following you.
Wow.
And respecting.
That's kind.
We should be looking at that, honestly. If we're going to be salty, we need to take these words to heart and go, well, how salty am I? Let's just not assume we're salty. How is what we say and do interacting with other people or influencing other people? That's the word you were saying, influencing other people.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I've really picked up on in this is Jesus is saying to me, you're going to do it anyway. Which way are you going to do it?
Yes.
Are you going to influence in a way that actually matters to the world, that actually brings my his
kingdom?
But his kingdom, but that represents his love and kindness and generosity. Am I actually going to do that? Do I want to do that? That's what I'm getting from this. Yeah. Do I want to be the salt of the earth? Because I have to choose to be, because if I don't choose to be the salt of the earth, I'm still going to influence anyway.
Yes, that's
right.
Does
that make sense?
I think it does. I think it really does. And I think it's really important that our influence might be trodden down. This isn't about salvation here. We're not talking about whether or not you'll be in the kingdom. He's talking about your influence. And if you don't influence well, then there's nothing of any value in your life. You'll get to the end of the life and it'll all be burned up. The Apostle Paul says, your acts will be either refined as gold, silver, and precious stone, or will be burned up like wood, hay, and stubble. And I think that's what it is. A life that isn't a quote-unquote salty life in the good way is going to be burned up. It's of no value. You get to the end of your life, you might be escaped. Paul says you might escape as one through the flames, but What have you done to make disciples of other people? What have you done to make the world look more like God's kingdom? And I don't think we think about that enough in our lives. We think about the fact that we're a Christian. Me and Jesus, we're okay. I'm going to heaven when I die. And we don't think about the fact that essential to our mandate is actually bringing life to other people and bringing his kingdom into other people's lives.
I just can't believe that God would choose someone like me. I can see why we'd choose somebody like you, but to bring the kingdom. So I'm actually quite stunned by this statement, you are the salt of the earth. And I'm struggling to really think it through, to grasp it. Yeah. And I'm not sure I really want the responsibility.
Yeah, you're not sure you want the responsibility.
Yes. And I just
God graces you with what he needs. Yeah. You have.
Well, thank you. There's this quote I wanted to read you just as an expression of influence. This is Woodrow Wilson, and this really got me. Woodrow Wilson was the president of the United States, and he's in this barbershop one time, and this person walks in, and he says that this person has he was a powerful personality. Sorry, he's sitting there when he became aware that a person of powerful personality had entered the room. This man came in quietly.
And this is the president saying someone of powerful personality has entered the room.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
This man came in quietly and in upon the same errand as myself. So he's getting a haircut, and he sits in the chair next to him, and then Woodrow Wilson says, here's the quote, "Every word the man uttered, though it was not in the least didactic, showed a personal interest in the man who was serving him." So this man with this big personality has come in and given all his attention to the person cutting his hair.
Even though he's not didactic, so he's not super talented in speech. Is that what it means? Not didactic. He's just basically saying this guy's really interested in the guy who's cutting his hair.
Yeah. So it seems to be he's being kind.
Yeah.
And then he says here, and before I got through with what was being done to me, his haircut.
It's a very long way of saying it.
I know,
it's a bit like Shakespeare. I've got to try and interpret what he's saying.
I was aware I had attended an evangelistic service. Did I say that right? An evangelistic service, yeah, because it was Mr. D.L. Moody.
Oh, the great evangelist.
In that chair. And he said, Woodrow Wilson said, I purposely lingered in the room after he had left and noted the singular effect that his visit had brought upon the barber shop. They talked in undertones. They did not know his name, but they knew something had elevated their thoughts. And I felt that I left that place as I should have left a place of worship. So this guy, D.L. Moody,
sounds pretty salty.
He didn't come in. He didn't preach to anybody. He just showed the barber attention, was kind and respectful. And yet the influence that he had to alter the mood in the room was extraordinary.
So he had salt coming out of him. Everywhere he went, he was influencing.
Yes. He had a fragrance.
A fragrance, yes. Yes, that's right.
That was undeniable.
There was a flavour about him, we could say, yes.
Yeah, and so everybody wanted to look at this person and to get to know him. And he felt he should have left a place of worship. That's his word. That guy didn't worship God in that place, but he created an atmosphere of worship. So
what I like about that analogy is, one, it's confronting or challenging for me, but also two, it's also encouraging, because one, it challenges me to think, well, have I got that kind of saltiness in my conversations when I walk into the supermarket, or I go and get my hair cut like I will on Thursday morning, whatever, have I got that kind of influence? And if not, why not? But it also encourages me that Jesus says I am the salt of the earth. So if he says it, I can be that. I can't be it in myself because I don't have the level of godliness within my own character, but I'm not relying on that. I'm relying on Christ in me. And so, Lord, when I walk into the hairdresser, as I do, and they know I'm a minister, and I talk to the girls in my hairdresser all the time, they know me pretty well. When I walk in there, I'm going, God, let me be the salt on Thursday morning. Let me, let me be salty by your flavour coming out of me and influencing me. And I'm encouraged by that, because I couldn't do it without Jesus, but he seems to be saying I'm the salt of the earth, so I'm going to take it in face value and go, okay, I can do that in Christ.
See, he says you're the salt of the earth, and that's what I've learned about Jesus in this little parable, is that Jesus appears to recognize and draw out, encourage and inspire people to be something that they don't recognize within themselves.
Very good. That's so good. Jesus is the master at seeing in people what they couldn't see in themselves. And I've heard Pastor Phil Pringle talk about this. That's what prophecy is, speaking over someone. Sometimes it's declaring over someone something they can't see in themselves yet. But that is what the nature of the prophetic gift is, talking to people, going, I see in you something. That is being salty.
And so that's what Jesus is doing to us now.
That's what Jesus is doing to us.
You are the salt of the earth.
Yeah, that's right. It's a prophetic word going, you might not feel like it, but I see in you that you can be a healthy, salty influence in the world.
Because he is actually just talking to the disciples here. He's not talking to a bunch of people or a big crowd. This is just to them.
His disciples, yeah.
To the people who want to follow him, yeah.
How much from a tiny little verse?
Yeah, a lot actually.
We haven't even mind the depth of the surface of this one. There's a lot of nuance and meaning in it, but there's a lot there for us.
And that's when you start to look at Jesus, this guy who you've heard about going to the cross, right? And you ultimately think that's the big act. He's gone to the cross and we have to consider that. But the more that we consider him is he switches his teachings in such a way that you think they're about him, but in fact, they're about you.
Yes. Yes, that's right. He turns it back to us. A lot of what he says is about what he says about us, which actually shows us something about him.
Yes.
When he says things about us that seem unrealistic or that'll never happen, Lord, I'm not that person. It shows me about him, how trusting he is, how powerful he is, that he's prepared to speak over us and empower us to be that thing that we could never hope to be in our own strength. Wow.
Yeah. And who is this guy that wants to invest so much time and consideration and effort into
us?
Us.
Thank you, Lord.
That is it for me.
That's
See,
it
I'm
for you.
stumbling my words.
that'll be
I'm
it for
blown
this
away.
episode. Yeah.
I'm blown away.
Well, it's good to have you back with us this year, folks, and we're looking forward to lots more episodes, lots more conversations between now and the end of 2025. We'll talk to you on the next episode.